Hi, I'm Tony Northrup, and for my book, Stunning Digital Photography, I'd like to show you how to take photos of star trails. Now, if you happen to be in the northern hemisphere, you'll be able to spot the North Star, which resides right up here above the planet, well, quite a ways in the distance, and it seems to remain stationary. The trick to the North Star is that every other star in the sky in the northern hemisphere will revolve around it, and it allows you to create these circular star trails anytime you're pointed north. Star trails start and end right here at your computer. The first step is to identify a good night to go out and take a picture of star trails. The things you're going to look for are a really cold and dry night. Now, you want it to be cold because the air tends to be a little bit drier and clearer, and it will cause less diffraction of the incoming light. Basically, you'll be able to see the stars much sharper. You also want a night with no moon whatsoever. Any sort of moon, if it's going to be in that part of the sky, is going to cast light in the sky and it's going to diffract everything, and you just won't be able to see the stars as sharply. So what I do is I open up my favorite app for this kind of thing, the Photographer's Ephemeris. It's free for Windows and Mac. I put in the location that I'm going to be at, and it tells me the moonrise and set time. So you can see that the moon is rising at 6:43 and it's setting at 4:55 p.m. So I should be able to take pictures in the middle of the night and not have the moonlight interfere with it. Now, you also need to find a location. The location should be as far from any sort of streetlights or city lights as possible. Even if the streetlight isn't in the frame, what you'll find is that the light from the streetlight still gets diffracted in the air and it makes things a little bit less clear. Doesn't mean you can't go in your backyard in a neighborhood and take some star trails, but it's going to turn out better the farther away you get from your streetlights. Now, the next step is going to be to set up your camera, and I'm still going to do this inside. For one, it's going to be much easier for you to see it if it's not in the middle of the night. And two, you're going to need to do this by hand in the daylight to make sure you know how. When you get out there under the right conditions for star trails, it's going to be pitch black. You will not be able to see a thing. You won't be able to see the buttons on your camera. You won't know what you're doing. You'll probably also be cold and your fingers will start to go numb. Star trails can be really physically demanding, so it's really important that you know exactly how to set up your camera and do it in the daylight first, and then when you get out there, it's going to be much easier for you. Just because it is going to be dark, you're going to want to bring a flashlight, or better yet, a headlamp that you can easily turn on and off. So here's what you need for your camera. You need yourself a good, steady tripod. The bigger and heavier, the better. It doesn't hurt if you have either a bubble level that you can put on top of your camera or an electronic level in your camera. And the reason for that is that at night, it's really hard to get your camera level because it's going to be so dark. You're going to be looking through the viewfinder and trying to see the horizon, and you're just not going to be able to tell. Now that you have your camera on a really steady tripod and you have it level, you're going to set up your camera. First thing I like to do is attach a really wide angle lens. The more wide angle, the better, because it's good to capture as much of the sky as you possibly can. Set that lens to manual focus, and then adjust the focus to be near infinity. Now, as you look at the focus ring on it, you're going to see a little infinity symbol and a line. You want to focus at the line that marks infinity and not just all the way to one end of your camera, because most lenses focus past infinity. So focus your lens to the infinity marking. Now, put your camera into manual mode. You're going to select a shutter speed of 30 seconds and an aperture of f4 or whatever the lowest f-stop number your lens supports is. Now, set your ISO to 1600 and take a test shot. Now, when you take this shot, it's going to take 30 seconds. So start it and then just wait around. Don't jostle your camera, don't mess with it. You want the camera to be completely still. After that 30 seconds elapses, you want to zoom into your picture, preview it, and then zoom all the way in so that you can see individual pixels. Make sure that the stars are nice and sharp. If they're not sharp, then you'll need to go back and adjust the focus a little bit and retest it until they are sharp. Now that you have your camera set up and the pixels are nice and sharp, we're going to take a dark frame shot. So what you can do is put a lens cap on your lens, or if you follow my advice and you've ditched your lens caps, Just put a hat or a coat or something over your lens cap so that it's completely dark. And then again, take that same 30-second shot. It's going to be a mostly black frame, but what happens is your camera is going to record some noise. This is just ambient noise. It'll be bright pixels that don't work properly and just stray stuff going on with the sensor. Every camera has it. It's nothing to be worried about. But when we run the pictures through software later, we'll be able to subtract out that dark frame. What it'll do is to create noise-free images on the rest of the pictures in the series. We set up our camera for a 30-second exposure earlier. Now, set the shutter for continuous shooting. It's the same mode you'd use for sports, where you hold the shutter down and just click, 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 just keeps taking pictures. It's a little odd to do that with a 30-second exposure, but it works great. So now that you have your shutter set to continuous, you're going to hook up a remote shutter release, just anything that will lock the shutter open. So I have one such device here. This is a $15 remote shutter timer, and I can't even tell you what brand it is because it's generic and they release it under a bunch of different names. I've seen it under the Yongno brand and Satechi and a handful Peener. Anyway, it'll look like this. It'll cost you like 15-20 bucks American, and you don't even need the timer features for it right now. All you need is this slider that allows you to hold the shutter open. This is exactly like holding the shutter button down on your camera and just keeping your finger there for hours. But if you did that, you'd be shaking the camera around and you'd probably get pretty bored. So you plug this into the camera, make sure you get one that matches your camera model because there are different connectors, and then lock the shutter open and you're on your way. Your camera is going to be taking a new shot every 30 seconds. So go do some light painting or read a book with a flashlight. Keep yourself busy while your camera works because it's going to take hours. Don't just ditch your camera though, because as the temperature changes, condensation can form in the lens. So depends how humid it is and how much the temperature is changing. But I like to check on my camera every 10 or 15 minutes or so, especially if it's during the summer and it might be a little more humid. You're gonna have to get out there and just wipe the lens clean. So bring yourself an absorbent, lint-free cloth and just wipe that lens down every now and then. Otherwise, you'll get all this condensation on the lens and it will absolutely ruin the pictures. You only get maybe 10-15 minutes of usable pictures. While your camera's shooting, keep an eye on the sky too. If a cloud rolls past, what will happen is it will ruin all of your star trails. I've had this happen time and time again. I go out to take star trail pictures and it's nice and clear when I start, and then 20 minutes in, clouds roll past, and they might come and go in just a couple of minutes, but they'll be locked into your long exposure and you'll just see this streak of white. It won't be attractive or anything. I pretty much bail on it if any sort of clouds roll in. That's why you want to pick a nice clear night where they're not predicting any sort of clouds whatsoever. How long should you stay out? As long as you can. I took my exposure at about 2.5 hours. That was over 300 different 30-second exposures and then stacked them so you'll be able to see what those look like. But the longer you stay out, the better. Now that you have your exposures, it's time to go back to the computer and copy those pictures to your computer. Now, I like to use Lightroom and process the raw files. Lightroom allows me to easily apply the same set of settings to the entire group of photos. So what you'll see when you get these pictures on there is the same thing that you'll see on any night photography picture. You'll probably see it'll be really orange and the colors won't look good at all. So you need to play with the white balance some, and you probably need to adjust the exposure. You want the stars to be nice and bright and the sky to be nice and dark. So adjust the black levels and the white levels, but apply the exact same settings to all those pictures. Now we're going to export those pictures as JPEG files into a single folder. With those pictures exported, we can now open up the application that I like to use, and it's called StarStax. So let's do that now. You're going to click that first toolbar button to open up the images. Then an easy way to select all the pictures in the folder is to press Ctrl-A. Now you can see all of your input images in here. Next, select that second toolbar button to subtract out your dark frame. If you didn't happen to capture a dark frame, that's okay. It just helps reduce your noise a little bit. Now, before you process the images, you need to go over into the Preferences tab You can open it by clicking the gear icon here. In the blending mode, I'm going to ask you to pick gap filling. This works the best. It's not selected by default though. And if you had dark images, be sure to select the subtract dark images checkbox. That's really all you need to do. So up next, you hit that last button, which is start processing. And now your computer is going to run for a while. Once it's done, you're ready to finish up and save your final photo. The gap filling mode of StarStax will fill in some gaps, and gaps are pretty common, and they happen for a couple of reasons. One, maybe you had to stop your camera for a second while you cleaned the condensation off the lens, or maybe you ran out of batteries and you swapped in a nice warm battery to keep the camera going. Sometimes somebody walks in front of your camera and ruins a particular exposure, or maybe a light shined in and you had to delete a frame. If you're really nitpicky about it, you might take out the frames that have airplanes flying through them because you don't like that dotted line kind of ruining your star trails. And any of those missing frames is going to cause a slight gap in your star trails. So the gap filling mode here can actually fill those in for you. It's pretty smart. It just looks for the star trails and then fills in any gaps in them. So what you're going to do is click this wrench icon over on the right and select the Show Threshold Overlay checkbox. Now you can adjust this threshold here until it shows just your star trails in green. The closer your shot is to the horizon, the more interference you're going to get and the less useful the gap filling tool is going to be, but I still find it helpful. So you want to adjust this until pretty much just the stars are green and you don't have anything else in green. And then just tweak the amount to fill in the gaps as efficiently as possible. Basically with the amount you need to actually save the final file. And if you still see gaps in there, crank the amount up some, save the file again, and continue that until you're happy with the process. So with the gap filling tool tweaked, you can finally save your final JPEG file. It's a little tricky part of the user interface here, but the Save As button is actually the third button on the toolbar. Don't click this button accidentally. It looks a lot like the disk button here. If you click this button, it starts processing again, and you're going to be waiting an hour again while your computer processes your picture. So be sure to click that third Save As button and save the JPEG file. I think any picture you share with friends, you should take the time to edit. So here is my final edited star trails picture. I had to go in and tweak the levels a little bit and make the stars a little clearer. And I even brushed in a separate foreground of the building, just taken from one of the single shots. The reason for that is we were having a outing with some of the stunning digital photography readers, and they were doing light painting. So the light painting showed up in some of my pictures. Not a big deal because I was stacking pictures anyway, so I just stacked the foreground from one image and kept the combined star trails to produce this final result. Now, night photography is challenging, especially in rural areas, so make sure you've worked through the practices in Chapter 10 before even attempting this, and read through the night photography chapter in its entirety, or none of this is going to make sense to you.